Hey guys, today we're looking at another one of those retro video cards that seem to find you without even trying, similar to cards like the FX 5200 or GeForce 4MX. I've accumulated quite a few of them, some were part of a motherboard bundle and also got a few as part of a video card bulk purchase. It is the ATI Radeon 9200 LE or SE, and you will find them easily on eBay and from computer recyclers, and because there are so many of them, the prices are extremely low. So the card we're working today is from Painkiller. The only model number it's got written on here is R92LE. It's got DVI, TV out and VGA, and you can see there's no Rage Theater chip, and that's because everything is integrated into the RV280 GPU, which we will talk about in more detail later on. There's a jumper to switch the TV output between NTSC and PAL. Looking at the memory, they're from Samsung with 5 nanoseconds, so they're good for 200 megahertz, and that's bang the clock speeds that are set into the device. I tried a bit of overclocking, didn't get too far, and we also will look at this later. This is a low profile card, so you can swap the bracket and put it in a low profile machine, and this particular version does have 128 megabyte of VRAM, and it's got an AGP 8X interface. So the story of the RV280 GPU that drives our Radeon 9200 LE begins with the Radeon 8500. This video card comes with the original R200 GPU, has 4 pipelines with 2 texture units per pipeline. The R200 GPU was also found in the Radeon 8500 LE, the Radeon 9100 and various all-in-wonder cards. ATI then created the RV250, a value GPU that went into the Radeon 9000 and 9000 Pro cards. This chip is much smaller and therefore it was cheaper to produce, but something had to give, and so this GPU only has 1 texture unit per pipeline instead of 2, and it also cannot do true form in hardware anymore. But it also gained a few features along the way, such as an internal TV encoder rather than the external Rage Theater chip, as well as having more display connections for DVI or a second VGA port, as well as having lower power draw. And then ATI did a final revision of the RV250, which is the RV280, which is the GPU that we have in our Radeon 9200 LE. It gained an AGP 8X interface and maybe some other minor tweaks here and there. The 9200 LE unfortunately has a narrower memory interface, only 64-bit instead of 128, and we will find out soon what impact this has on the performance. Other cards using the RV280 chip include the regular Radeon 9200 as well as the Radeon 9250. I think it's time to find out what this video card can do. We've got an Athlon 64 4000 Plus on an Asus AV8 Deluxe motherboard, 2GB of DDR400 memory in dual channel config, a Sound Blaster Audio 2 ZS, we've got a 120GB SATA hard drive, a SATA optical drive. Next up, we're installing Windows XP Service Pack 3. Then I'm installing the unofficial Service Pack 4 to get all the patches. Chipset drivers, the latest ones from VIA. USB 2.0 drivers, also the latest ones from the VIA website. The ATI drivers, the latest version from the AMD website, and we're going to have a look at the drivers in more detail later on. And the Creative Labs driver for the sound card. Just make sure that you go into the properties and turn off CMSS 3D. So after installing the card, I usually run GPU set just to have a look at the specifications, and I got a bit of a surprise. This is actually a 9250. So yes, there was apparently a 9250 LE as well. We've got 240 megahertz on the GPU and 200 megahertz on the memory, and unfortunately look at the bus width, only 64-bit memory interface. And here we're running 3D Mark 2001 ACE. It's always a good benchmark to make sure everything works. In the nature scene, we can see that the card does struggle quite a bit. It's chucking along. So the result is just over 5000 3D Mark. Not a great score, but well, that is what we're gonna work with today. So we will have a closer look at the drivers, anti-aliasing and isotropic filtering and overclocking later. But now let's have a look at some games. So this time I'm gonna shut up. I'm just gonna put all the game captures on the screen with some notes about the settings and the detail settings I used down below in the video.
Gate 1.
I used to be a taxi driver. Even though I wasn't making much and I worked from dawn to dusk, I was glad to be working.
Great! We made it!
Yes, 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 yes. Ah, there you are.
Take care. The mercenaries are trained to work together. If you alert one, they will bring others.
And we're back. So that was a nice mix of games from old to new, and the older games, well, this video card runs them quite well, even at high resolutions like in Quake II you can run at 1600 by 1200. And with the later games, you just have to be a little bit realistic with the options. Maybe don't use ultra, go for medium or high instead. And instead of running at 1600 by 1200, go with 1024 by 768, and you should be able to play a wide range of games on this video card. So coming back to the driver, the latest version on the AMD website is Catalyst 6.11 from 2006, and those are the drivers I used. Now I've done a bit of testing with different driver versions. What I found is that they're more consistent than the NVIDIA drivers. They don't lose as much speed going with the latest drivers. Especially under Windows XP, the situation is a lot more consistent. Under Windows 98, I found a lot more fluctuations. So in general, and this is just a rough general statement, I haven't got any fancy charts to back this up just yet, but in general with Windows XP, you should be fairly good with the latest drivers. Let's talk about texture filtering first. So I've run some benchmarks in Quake II at 800 by 600 with no anti-aliasing and no anisotropic filtering. We're getting a score of 256 FPS. And then here we've got a chart going with anisotropic filtering from 2x to 4x to 8x to 16x. We can see a drop in performance, but it's fairly minimal. So this is a video card where you can just turn on 16x AF and leave it turned on, and it will have minimal impact on your performance. So let's have a look at anisotropic filtering quality. When you're doing online research, you will find quite a bit of information about this and a little bit negative. People like to point out the flaws, but you must realize these are really old video cards. So here we are in Quake 3, and I've typed something into the command line which colors in the different MIP map levels, and you can see with 16x anisotropic filtering, this GPU cannot do trilinear filtering, so it uses bilinear filtering, and that means there are harsh transitions between the MIP map levels. Is this an issue in games? Not really. I've tried quite a few games out and experimented with the settings, and to me it wasn't much of a big deal. I definitely preferred the sharpness that anisotropic filtering gave me, and I did not see those MIP map seams. Unless you're really looking for them, I think it's not that much of a deal. The other issue with the anisotropic filter is it's angle dependent. The ground usually is horizontal, and everything works. You look in the distance and it's nice and sharp. Now here we are in Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and you can lean to the left and right, changing the angle a little bit, and it is still sharp if you look in the distance. However, if we look up at a wall and we turn the angle a little bit more, we can see that then the anisotropic filtering doesn't work anymore. So there seems to be a point beyond a certain angle and a certain amount of degrees that the anisotropic filter doesn't work anymore, and that's basically what happens. True angle independent anisotropic filtering on Radeon cards wasn't happening until the HD 6000 series, so lots of these old cards had issues and took shortcuts. But the bottom line is you losing minimal performance with anisotropic filtering on this card, and in my opinion it still improves the quality. So despite the flaws, leave it on, turn it on to 16x, and it will make your games look nicer. And the next thing we're going to look at is anti-aliasing. Now the RV280 and all the other R200 GPUs, they do super sampling anti-aliasing. It's basically they render the game at a higher resolution and then downscale it. So this is computationally really expensive. It's going to cost a lot of performance, but it looks fairly nice in my opinion. It looks consistent because it removes jaggies from geometry as well as from textures, including transparent textures. So we've got some benchmark results here. Once again, in Quake II, with everything with AF and AA turned off, we're getting 256. But then we can see even as soon as we turn on 2x AA, we basically get less than half the performance, 103.6. At 4x AA, we're getting only 59 FPS, and at 6x AA, we're only getting 25 FPS. So we can see straight away, this is not something you can run with modern DirectX 8 games. This is something you can use with older games that run at 200, 300 FPS. And we've got an example here. We've got Need for Speed, I think it's Road Challenge, running at 640 by 480 with fraps, and we can see it here running without anti-aliasing. And we can now switch over to 4x anti-aliasing, and that's a little bit too demanding. We're not hitting the 60 FPS anymore, but the image looks a lot nicer. The jag is all removed, and not just from the geometry but also from the textures. So we can go for a compromise. Here we have the same game with 2x anti-aliasing, and yeah, that still looks a lot nicer. Yes, it runs only at 640 by 480, but with anti-aliasing it looks a lot nicer, and that's the choice you gotta make. Play at low resolution with anti-aliasing, or turn off anti-aliasing and play at a higher resolution. And in a game like this Need for Speed, yeah, you can't have both. So it's not going to be fast enough to run high resolutions and anti-aliasing. So this is something on this video card especially that you can use for the older games. And finally, let's have a quick look at overclocking. I'm using the ATI tools because it's got this artifact scanner and it can overclock automatically. And remember how we looked at the memory chips and they're rated for 200 megahertz, and yeah, that's really what we're getting. It tops out around 220, 225, and we're already starting to see errors. So this is not an overclocking champion at all. Unfortunately, yeah, not much I was able to do with overclocking the memory, and the reason I went for the memory is because this video card has a 64-bit memory interface, so that's where you wanna overclock the most. You're not gonna see much improvement overclocking the GPU. You're gonna see the most performance gain when you overclock the memory. And that's it, guys. We've reached the end of the video, so let's quickly wrap it up. That was the Radeon 9200 LE or SE. So one of the highlights is this card is cheap as chips, easy to find, and very likely you already have one lying around. This card just finds you. You don't have to look for it, but if you do look for it, it's not going to cost you a lot. I like that the card is reasonably modern. It's got the HEP 8X, DVI and everything, and it's got decent drivers. I was really impressed with the drivers and the compatibility. All the games I tried, they work just fine. It's got 128 meg of VRAM, which is nice. Overclocking was a bit of a disappointment. Didn't get much extra performance out of this card. It has a few eye candy features, anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering, and despite this being a budget card, you can still apply those settings in many games. The anisotropic filtering you can just turn on to 16x. It's fast enough to work with pretty much any game, Anti-aliasing not so much. That's something for older games because it uses the computational expensive super sampling anti-aliasing technology. It was only with the next generation, the R300 GPU, where they had more advanced MSAA technologies. And that's really it. Any question, guys, about this video card, do leave them down below in the comments. Also, did you have one of these back in the old days? Did you have a Mobility 900 GPU maybe? And what did you think of that GPU? And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you soon with another one.